All right. Actually. Okay. All right, man. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm well, Zach. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I just rushed out of a meeting to
Yep,
come hang out with my good friend Aaron. I love you so much, man. I'm so happy that we
right back at you.
connect. Yeah, man. So, a bit of our background with Aaron and I, we first officially met at Thunderbird Academy.
Yep,
Is the way I understand it. We met at Thunderbird Academy our junior year. I was new to the
yep.
school, and I think you'd gone there since your freshman year, right?
Since pre-K.
Since pre-K, man, you're a part of that community. I love it. I love it.
Uh, uh,
But yeah, I just remember you being one of the first people that I ran into and one of the first people that was just super nice to me. I just remember you being tall, athletic, and I just remember you yeah, just being super friendly, super nice to me. I was shy, man. I think I for sure have opened up, but
for
naturally I think
sure.
I'm more of an introverted person. So when I went to Thunderbird Academy, I was just kind of doing my thing, and I remember you were one of the handful that that really said hi to me, so I appreciated that,
Absolutely.
man.
That was fun. I was glad you joined the ranks. It was definitely, it wouldn't have been the same without you.
For sure, man. And some of my favorite memories with Aaron, with you, were our senior year is when we really began to kind of curate some memories. And
Yep.
I remember we had this thing where we would fake fight with each other.
Yeah.
So Aaron and I would pretend like we were getting into a heated argument, and we would stage fights. And I remember there was one time where I'm pretty sure one of our friends, shout out to Charles Robinson,
Yep.
we were in the student center and we were like arguing and it was getting heated. And I just remember like I acted like we started getting into a fight, and I remember he just came and like
Yep.
tackled me under the couch. He's like, "Get off my friend, leave Aaron alone." Those were
Oh, it was too funny.
those were good times.
Uh, it was that same week that we staged one in the calf where we
Yep.
had you throw me across the table.
It got intense. And then we took it to the next level. I remember we went to leadership camp
Yep.
in Northern California, and I remember we
Yep.
staged this big fight at the entrance of the place where we were going to. So, man, fighting has just been a big part of our friendship. But I appreciated
Uh,
it. And it's funny because it
yeah,
was
man.
it was on that same trip that where you helped me develop my relationship with Alicia,
Yeah,
who is now my wife.
yeah,
Um,
man. Crazy. That was 10 years ago.
10 years ago, yep. We were crowded into a small van, just this
Yep.
tiny van, and I remember you were sitting right next to her. Of course, I'm the small guy, so I was stuffed in the back with everyone's luggage. It was like me alone, everybody else up front in the small van, and then Aaron was sitting next to Alicia, who soon after became my girlfriend and then fiance, and then we got married. But I remember just sitting there being alone, and you just leaned over to me and you're like, "Hey, bro, want to swap seats?"
It was so funny, man. Because we had talked up until that point, because that was on the ride back, wasn't it?
That was a ride back. That was a ride back.
Yeah. Because that was the first time that we had spent kind of undivided attention. Because there was what, four of us guy leaders.
Hmm.
And so we were bunk mates. So
Yes, that's
we
right.
kept going to all of these meetings. That's where the phrase "man, he's good at everything" came from.
Where did that come
So
from?
I don't remember the exact story, but anyways, that's when we really started to connect because like me and you we were walking everywhere together
That's true. That's
because
true.
the other two people were juniors, so we interacted a lot on that
Right.
kind of upper level, if you want to say it. So we got close, and then we started talking about you and Alicia. So on the way back, I was like, I gotta hook my man up.
Dude, you are a homie. You helped me so much. Yeah, I remember I remember we
So
kind of
funny.
transitioned. You're like, "Oh, I don't remember exactly what you did, but I just remember you being like, "Oh, I think I'm going to lay out a little bit. Hey, Zach, you want to sit up here,
Yes,
bro?" Like, and I was like,
yes.
"Dude, Aaron, you are so smooth, man. You are so smooth." Unfortunately, it was on that ride back that Alicia didn't confess her love for me. I told her how much I liked her. she didn't quite tell me how much she liked me. I think she was a little, yeah, she had some questions, but it worked out nonetheless. We
It started there. That's
It
all that
started there.
matters,
That's all
man.
that matters is the spark was curated and you assisted me
Oh my
in that
goodness.
experience, man. So it's much appreciated to this day.
Ah, man. Yeah, I love your guys' relationship. So self-serving completely. I mean, the amount of love and inspiration I get from you guys was well worth giving up my seat for you.
Not even, man. And we appreciate you and Jess. You guys are awesome.
Uh,
So, we connected recently. You made a pit stop through Arizona, which I
no,
appreciated. And then, we kind of got to talking and, we talked about some pretty monumental, at least for me, it was mentally shifting ideas,
no.
um, that I think really helped, kind of propel me forward in my thinking that we kind of want to get into today. And so, um, as as we start getting into that, I just want to kind of open it
Sure.
up. Like, what are you doing right now? What's going on in your life? What transitions have you made, to kind of get you to where you are at now? We went to PUC together.
Yep.
I think you took a year off. You and Jess took a year off, and you guys were student missionaries.
Yep.
And then, Alicia and I kind of finished our way through, graduated, kind of hit the ground running here in Arizona. And I know you have gone through, well, you've just, you're out there in California, man. So what's new? What are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I wasn't even going to throw in my experience in the mission field, but honestly, that's where a lot of this struggle came
Yes.
into play that I'll get into. But yeah, here in California, Loma Linda area, and yeah, I've been going through quite a few transitions. I worked a lot of different jobs after college, just trying to support me and my now wife and put her
Mm-hmm.
through grad school. Um, and I was working in an accounting department through really no direction of my own. It was just something
Right.
that kind of happened, and yeah, so I did accounting and excuse me.
Oh, you're good, man.
uh, Sorry, I went running and I still have some of that
Oh,
runner's phlegm, I guess.
you're good, bro.
Yeah, so I was working in accounting. Just it was a job to get Jess and I through her grad school, and she graduated, got a
Mm-hmm.
job, and so I sat with the decision what I wanted to do, and so I walked away from a job. That was in March of 2019.
Okay.
Uh, so
Okay.
I have not collected any paycheck. I've done some odd things here and there, but yeah, I really struggled with what I wanted to do, and a big part of it came from my time in the mission field.
Right.
I had all of these big dreams always
Yeah.
growing up, and I always struggled with the tension of I want to do something that's impactful, but
Right.
also allows me to live kind of the lifestyle that I want.
Of course.
So working in the accounting department for this company, this guy was a super successful business person, and just super successful. I
We'll
won't
go
get too
there.
much into it. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so essentially, I just saw how much he had done and how
Mm-hmm.
much he was impacting the world, and it was through business.
Wow.
And up until that point, I hadn't really connected the two. It was
Mm-hmm.
always kind of either go the business route, make a bunch of money,
Right.
or go the people route and be a teacher, be a pastor,
Yeah.
be a chaplain, a counselor. And so when I realized that they didn't have to be two separate things, I started looking. And what I'm doing now, after almost 2 years of searching, is I'm doing personal finance. So
Awesome.
uh, I work with clients, either individuals or businesses, and I
Mm-hmm.
just help them realize that the dreams and the goals that they have are attainable, and I sit down to help them figure that out. And then Jess and I, my wife, we also have a few other businesses that we operate as well. But the biggest thing that I'm doing now is I'm really developing a lifestyle and, a
Mm,
grind, shall I say it, of things that we want to work towards.
yeah.
And, and it's a total encompassing of a lot of different aspects of life. So it's traveling and business and relationships. And it's a really cool part of my life because I'm cultivating exactly what I want my life to be like.
Woo! And I want to go there. I want to go there. But before we touch on that,
Yep.
what was it that kind of really propelled you into that direction of wanting to? Because I know you said you did a year as an SM. Maybe
Yep.
we can tap into that a little bit. You had some
Sure.
some time to think and reflect on what you want to be or what you want to do, and then but what was it that really began to propel you forward into thinking like, hey man, I'm not sure what I want to do, but I want to make sure that, I'm not settling
Yeah,
for something that maybe isn't exactly me.
for
Because you
sure.
mentioned not only doing what you want to do, but also living the way you want to live, right? I
For
think
sure.
it's so often than not, like our mind and our heart, we feel like we have to make that trade-off. Well, if you want to
Yeah,
live a certain way, then you got to do a certain thing. And maybe doing that thing isn't making you happy, but what's the what's the trade-off? So what helped you, I guess, begin to identify that, go in that direction?
absolutely. And the short answer is a whole lot. So yeah, I was sitting at this job for months on end, and I just saw so many people doing things that they wanted to do, and
Hmm.
I would sit there at my 9 to 5, and I just had all of these dreams running through my head.
Right.
Um, but it was a multiple.
Of
Uh,
course.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's tough to say that there was a pivot point, but I
It's
think
never really any one thing.
it
Kind of,
isn't.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's for everyone, right? I mean, no experience in life can be pinpointed on one exact thing because even that one, one factor, one experience has a whole bunch of things that lead up to it and then
Right.
fall out from it. But yeah, I mean, a big thing, it was just seeing people doing the things that they were passionate about,
Yeah.
being successful, and my boss
Hmm.
was one of them. And so it was hard, super, super generous guy, but he also did very well for himself. And so,
Hmm.
I've shared this story, I believe, with you. And to me, I was doing accounting. I was kind of in control of quite a few things for him and his company.
Hmm.
And yeah, I helped him, or I was in charge of writing checks, and I wrote a check for $800,000.
Yeah.
He came into my office and said, "Hey, I need this check for $800,000," and it was
Wow.
to buy a diamond,
Okay.
just one diamond, and for me it was like, wait, what do you mean
You want?
you want to buy an $800,000 diamond on a random Tuesday afternoon?
Yeah.
And so yeah, that sat with me for a long time. I was like, how does this man do what he's wanting to do? He's
Right.
built all of these things to be successful in ways that he's wanted to, right? He essentially turned a business, a profitable business, one of them, out of dirt bike racing.
Wow.
It's, most people just do it and hemorrhage money because they're spending so much trying to, just have fun, and he was able to do it anyway. So it was crazy to me. And then on top of that, he also told me the story of how he sold it for like 1.2. So
Oh
it
my
was
goodness.
that constant connection with somebody who was living a bigger and better
Hmm.
life, but also striving for the things that he wanted to do.
Wow.
And that's not even the most influential person. It was just somebody in that season of my life where I had this tension of, what do I want to do, but
Hmm.
also what do I need to do to live the lifestyle I want, right?
Right.
So that was kind of the start of it all, is just sitting there day in and day out and working for somebody who had lived to the expectations that he had set for himself
Yeah.
while also following passions of his.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
That's so good because I that's exactly where I want to go. Um, it's is it rare that we really do we see growing up people who are doing what they actually want to do? I got to see that somewhat in my family. My dad, chased his dream of, working for the agency and doing what he's now doing. And he
Yep.
loves it. But, there's so many people I've ran into, especially in college when nobody knows what they want to do.
Right.
But it can be so hard, especially depending on the environment that you're working in. Like, are people really doing what they want to be doing? Are they living the way that they want to live?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like that's such an exciting thing to kind of capture. But why is it, do you think that we either grow? I don't know. It's like we kind of give up on our dream. It's like we're told that in order to live, somewhere we settle. And I'm not sure
For
where the
sure.
agreement is made, but somewhere I think along the way, the agreement is made is, man, I don't know if I can have the life that I actually want because I have to live right now the life that I need.
Hmm.
And the life that I need isn't necessarily, exciting. And then not even to add more onto that, but then the flip side of it is, well, maybe once I finally get that thing, I've made
Yeah.
all the sacrifices to be able to get that thing. Now I have it. But man, like it wasn't as fulfilling or as satisfying as I thought it would be. And I feel like those
Yeah.
disappointments, right? Those disappointments challenge us, and then those disappointments discourage us, and it
Yeah.
makes us feel like, well, maybe our dreams aren't really what we're meant to, they weren't meant to be.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. And a big part of that, I think, is this could be a whole nother conversation, but
I love it.
it's the structure in which that we grow up with, because we are taught that that's almost the settling point, right? I mean, how many
Mm.
times have you heard somebody talk about the fact that, how's work going? It's work.
Yeah,
Oh, how do you like
exactly.
your job? It's a job. And so, that is, even the undertones of that, it's ingrained, because you always
Mm.
hear people talking about it. And something that really, really stretched me and challenged me after quitting my job, where I recognized seeing people in the company that had been there for 30 years,
Yeah.
working for somebody who chased their dreams, right? And
Mhm.
that in of itself, it really pushed me,
Yeah.
because I saw somebody who had fought so hard to get where they were, doing what they wanted to do,
Okay.
and then they had people that settled for them, that helped
Hmm.
them grow their own passion. And that was a constant struggle, because it was like, how can you, somebody who is so passionate about growing what they want to grow, also not instill that in the people that are
Oh,
working for you?
oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
But again, it's a completely different conversation, right? But
Man, well, no, but I think isn't that what frustrates us though sometimes, is that we see other people, like, or maybe even people that we work for, and it's like, man, you're accomplishing what you want to do and you look so happy, but like, who's going to hold me accountable, to the same thing? So it's almost like extreme ownership. We have to take extreme ownership of our own growth and our own situation, because unfortunately that doesn't happen. It's not everywhere that people are going to make sure you're doing your thing. But also,
yeah,
on the flip side, it's probably hard for somebody to know that that's what you want. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Unless they see the hunger in your eyes, it's kind of hard for them to know, like, oh, you want to move up in the ranks, or oh, you want to understand these passions of yours. It's kind of hard if you're not, I guess, communicating that.
yeah. And I think a big part of exactly what you explained is it's that, it's almost that barrier, right, of just communication, because somebody who's so forward thinking doesn't have a lot of time to sit there and say, like, hey,
Right.
why aren't you going to that place with me?
Yeah.
But yeah, what was crazy for me is I was in a place that I could have gotten content.
Huh.
And that's a
Okay.
weird thing to say, but
Yes.
they offered me promotion, and
Wow.
they offered me movement. And so I quickly saw myself getting to the place that all of these people had been there for 30 years,
Wow.
because there was enough forward thought for them that was being provided. And so it was
Hmm.
enough challenge and enough change and enough security
Oh my
that
goodness, Aaron.
that complacency was almost bought. And
Wow.
to me, I saw it, because I also got the flip side of where they understood that they were complacent,
Yeah.
but they didn't understand the process that it took them to get there.
Woo.
And so when I had that, I was like, I will not allow myself to be complacent, even if it means short term, I have much more benefits, right? So, Jess and I have lived off of one income for
Hmm.
almost 2 years. That's a
Wow.
big deal.
Yeah.
And, it could have been very easy for me to go just get a second income for us, and our
Yeah.
life would have been a lot better
Right.
in the short term.
Of course. Yes.
Um, so anyways, where you touched on and where I want to go is I had all of these questions of like, what in the world do I want to do then? Like,
Hmm.
if I'm going to walk away from this, I need to have a plan,
Hmm.
because I can't give up a promotion. I can't give up the security and the easy answer to anyone's question of, oh, what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
um, and I didn't want to not have an answer, and so I
Right.
started to seek it out. And it's funny because the more I asked one of my really really good friends, best friends,
Hmm.
and he's a mentor of mine, Curtis Miller. I asked him, how did you know what you wanted to do?
Yeah.
Because I had never heard any of these complacent remarks. It was
Okay.
always, so he's an orthopedic surgeon, and he knew from an early age that's what he wanted to do.
That's so crazy.
It's insane. It's insane. And so I was like, how did you get to that place? Because
Hmm.
most people don't, right?
Okay.
Most people don't do that. And so I went to him and I was like, Kurt, I need you to explain this to me. I don't get
Hmm.
it. How did you find what you wanted to do so early on, stick through it, and now in a place where you're being rewarded not only, you know, fiscally
Of
and
course.
challenging, but just overall fulfillment? Like how did you even know that that's what you wanted to do? Because that's a
Yeah.
big stinking question, right? But also, how did that not change over the years, right? Because I mean,
Mm.
that's the other big thing, is so many people think that they get into something, or going into something, they think it's going to be great, and then out the other side they're like, no, this is
Didn't turn out what I
not what
wanted. Yeah.
exactly. And that's kind of where I thought I was as well. I wanted to do architecture for a long time, and that's long gone. So I mean, that's not even something to get into, but that was what I wanted to do all the way through schooling.
Hmm.
And when I got out and it didn't work out, it was kind of a, wait, what?
I
And so
know.
I asked him, and it was just it yeah, yeah, it was crazy.
That is, yeah, that is crazy. Wow, something you said that while you were talking, I feel like I should be taking notes while you were talking, because my mind was going so many different places. But yeah, that's just wild that it's much harder to even make the decision, I feel like, that you made when there's a promotion being offered, right? Because it's almost like that's another mental obstacle that you have to get over, versus like, oh man, I just hate my job and I want to I want to leave. It's more
Yeah,
so like, I can see myself mentally staying here, or settling, like you said, the word settling. And it's no fault to the company, I don't think, because I listened to a podcast called Secret to Success by Eric Thomas and a group that's really good. But one thing that they said is like, these, especially with their grandparents, like companies like GM, for example,
yeah,
like you'll hear their grandparents talk about, like, someone talking about their grandpa, and he was saying that, oh, he loved GM because GM took care of the family. It put food on the table. It helped sustain his community. And he goes, well, of course, grandpa, like, of course they're going to take care of you and your family financially, because what you are providing for them is worth what they are giving you. So
yeah,
it's not a surprise to any organization that, of course, they want to make it the best experience for the employee, figuratively, theoretically,
yeah, yeah,
because of what maybe that employee brings to the table. And that makes you then think, if they're making me this comfortable, like, in what way are they benefiting from what
yeah,
from what I'm doing?
yeah.
And
And go, keep going.
no, go.
It's just it is crazy, because especially stepping on the other side of that, curtain, shall we say, of then operating a business, it's absolutely 100% that way.
Hmm.
You want to provide value for somebody,
Correct.
but only to the extent that they provide more value.
Hmm.
And that relationship used to bother me, except for the fact that if somebody is content with that, then that's okay.
Right.
That's a good deal. And
Yeah.
it's funny, I just had a conversation this morning actually, and it was this exact concept where
Mm.
a friend had he's retired now. He operated multiple farms, did worked a bunch of different jobs, but he
Mhm.
worked at this factory, and he worked with this guy who his entire job for 40 years was to take a piece of metal from one side of the conveyor belt, put it under a press,
Uh-huh.
pull the lever,
Move
move
on
it to
to
the
the
other
next.
side of the conveyor, and start again.
And this guy's living his best life.
And everyone kept, he had been there, he was the longest tenured employee there,
Wow.
and everyone kept saying, hey, you want to step into management? Do you want to be a floor manager? Like, what do you want to do? We're going to do whatever you want. Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
And he said, no, I'm happy. This is, I want to do what I'm doing.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And it was just this, and it gets back to so many of the questions that I had sitting there at that desk for so many hours,
Hmm.
which is, why am I not content?
Okay.
Because if there are people out there that are content, why am I not in that place? Because
Oh.
there are people who are absolutely content with where they are at.
Mhm.
And that's not a fault of theirs. Like, you
Mhm.
can't expect everyone to have the same goals and dreams that you have. And for me, it's easy to say that because I have big dreams, I have big goals, and so
Right.
I naturally, I naturally tend to associate, or I don't know what the right phrasing of it, but I'm
Mhm.
attracted to people with those types of goals. And at the end of the day, what I've learned to appreciate is people who don't have as lofty as goals as I do.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that they aren't seeking the same thing,
Yeah.
because what we're all seeking is that fulfillment, that
Mm.
happiness, and to be content. And if we were to put it on, a traditional scale of success, or
Mhm. Mhm.
whatever the world likes to deem calibers of people,
Yeah.
if somebody reaches that at level 1, why why is it not okay for that person to be content at level 1,
Hmm.
but also to interact and to positively have relations with, somebody who's striving for level 10?
Right.
And yeah, so it was just sitting in that tension of, why am I not where I want to be,
Yeah. Yeah.
but also not knowing where I wanted to be. So that
Yeah.
was,
I want to go there. Um, what you said about the contentment aspect, this has been coming up in my own prayer life, my personal life,
yeah,
especially reading Philippians 3 or reading through the book of Philippians. That's where that verse is found. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But in it,
yeah,
Paul's talking about, like, look, I've been shipwrecked. I've been, I've been like beaten. I've been arrested. I've been persecuted. He says, I know what it means to be hungry, and I know what it means to, be well fed. And he says, but I've learned the secret to being content. And for so
mhm,
long, I've took that verse as being like, oh, the secret to being happy is being content. But he continues on and says, no, the secret to learning how to be content is that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. This is a guy who sees endless possibilities with where he is going in his journey. So of course he can be okay in any
yeah,
situation, knowing full and well what the bigger thing is, or all these other opportunities that he could be seeking. So of course, I listened to I'm listening to Land of the Giants and Jeff Bezos' struggle with developing Amazon, and just all the, buy-in and all the failure and all the, just where it was the company went early on financially, but he was looking at it. His whole secret was the long game. I'm in this for the long game. And, how, I don't know. I don't care how you really feel about Amazon, because, whatever he's done, it's working. But this idea that, um, it's okay if I'm failing then in this season. It's okay if something's not working because I know the possibilities. And so
Yeah.
that understand, like you're describing right now, that, dreaming bigger, like, and going after that thing, you can be just as content as the person who feels like, hey, I'm happy where I am,
Yeah.
talking level 1, level 10, um, type of thing. So, yeah.
So it's crazy because any anyone that you talk to that is great in whatever field that they're great in
Mm-hmm.
explains that exact process. It's exactly what you said. Being content with whatever the ups and downs of getting somewhere is always the
Mm-hmm.
key to getting there. And once you get there, once you're there, it doesn't even matter because you've understood what it takes to go through ups and downs, right? Because if there's
Yeah.
a benchmark that you're striving for, I mean, if you're dedicated, which most people that set a goal that they really want to get to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's always goals that people don't truly care about. It's like, I want to get a six
Right.
pack this year. Well, if you
Right.
really cared about it, you'd do it.
Yeah. Why are you? Yeah, exactly.
But anyone who gets to that point, you know, who understands that a goal is something that they're actually gonna get to,
Mm-hmm.
well, you're gonna get to it.
Mm-hmm.
So then what after that? If you're so focused on, and that's exactly what you're talking about, and what we're trying to understand is this place of being content has nothing to do with your goals or your job title or your pursuits,
Mm-hmm.
outside of the fact that it is all a process of learning
Mm-hmm.
and being content with that aspect of it. Because
Wow.
that guy who's pulling the press,
Yeah.
sure, maybe he's not being challenged at work, but at home, he may be, striving to build a relationship
Ooh,
with somebody in his community. Maybe
that's
his
so
neighbor
good.
is that challenge for him because his neighbor is disabled and he spends 2 hours every night interacting with this person to build
Man.
something else. And so it's just this aspect of, we all think about life in such a simple way that you compare yourself to so many other people
Mm-hmm.
and you expect that if you only had if you only had, then you would be content. Or if I was only here, I would be content. And it's talking about, it's important to talk about it because that is never the case. Because what happens when you get there? Well, you can no
Wow.
longer get there again. Sure, you can
Goodness.
remain in it, but the ability that somebody has to continually get there or to continually go through the process that Paul's talking about, that's where that joy is, that content is. And
Man.
and Kobe Bryant is, you know, I'm a Suns fan, so it's hard to ever talk about the Lakers or a player of the Lakers
For
positively.
sure.
But Kobe always talked about how the championship, yes, was the goal, but that's not what
Mm-hmm.
he loved. Holding up his fifth trophy honestly was not any more of a source of joy than recovering from his Achilles injury. And it
Mm-hmm.
was because he had learned that the process was much more impactful to his daily life and the joy it brought him
Mm.
than the goal that he achieved.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I've come to appreciate, even Mamba mentality, this idea of just,
Yeah.
being the best you that you could possibly be. I think what I'm coming to discover in my own journey is that I need to make sure that I'm loving the process, because that's ultimately
Yeah.
what's going to set me apart from the rest of the pack or what's happening. Like, sure, you're accomplishing great things, but what good is what you're accomplishing if you're not ultimately happy? Like,
Yeah.
if it's not truly bringing you joy, why do you keep doing the same thing? But I love what you said, because sure, the guy who's, pressing down on the steel and, but what he's coming home to is an amazing marriage. What
Yeah.
he's coming to is a super happy family. What
Yeah.
he's coming to is a community. And so what he's doing, elsewhere does not really compare to what he's experiencing in the moment that matters.
Yeah.
And I think that that's true, because the trade-off ultimately of what's going to make you content is not necessarily any one specific thing. And that's kind of where I want to go next, is about
Yeah.
being disappointed when we get our answer, or being
Yeah.
disappointed when we come to that thing and we thought when we
Yeah.
got there it would ultimately make us happy, but then we get there and we're like, man, we're only left with more questions. Because
Yeah.
like you said,
Yeah.
we're so, I don't know where we develop it from, but we're so simple-minded that, we think that when we arrive, that it's going to clear all, and I'm just going to automatically be happy, and that'll be good. But that's not necessarily, not necessarily true. So
Yeah.
walk us through that process of, when the answers aren't enough and the
Yeah.
questions begin coming.
Yeah. And to preface this, and where I want to get to is, like you said, it's not a one size fit all, or a one shoe fits all.
Mm-hmm.
And I use this all the time with, I have a few mentees that I work with, and I talk about it all the time. If everyone in the world loved the same exact food, life would be so boring. And so, as long as you are looking, as long as you are enjoying the food that you love, great, because, different foods are for different people.
Of
And
course.
when you find that commonality, it's even more impactful.
Hmm.
So anyways, just a caveat, because I think it's important to understand that no matter where you are on that scale, it's important to understand for yourself that you're not going to be the same for somebody else. And that's a good thing, because
Yeah.
goodness graciousness, if somebody hadn't decided that they didn't want to eat plain rice their whole life because everyone was going to love it the same, I would have never had Thai food in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
that would be a sad thing.
That
So,
yes.
super sad thing.
I love Thai food.
I know. So anyways, getting to that is, and being disappointed with the answers to questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
To understand that process, I think it makes the most sense for me to pull from some experiences. So I'll walk you through something that I recently watched, and uh, I love that in our day and age we
It's
can
what we
learn
watch.
lessons, right? Right? It's so cool. Uh, and I just love it, because I love that we can talk about bigger lessons that we learned from a TV show, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so cool. But anyway, so I was watching an episode of a TV show, and I won't get too much into it in case anyone wants to watch it, or
Right.
has watched it, or they don't want it to get spoiled. But it's this TV show about um, the Queen of England and Prince Philip,
Mm-hmm.
and the Apollo 11 moon landing.
Okay.
And so, to set the scene a little bit, uh, Prince Philip is going through a lot of the same questions that I was struggling with when I was sitting at my 9 to 5 job, of just,
Mm-hmm.
he was going to a bunch of speaking appointments, and he was, watching the clock and when he needed to be done. And so he was in this unsettling period of his life. And the whole space program just really captured his attention.
Yeah.
And he found that it was something that he was so attached to and enamored with,
Mm-hmm.
and something that he was just constantly checking in with. And I think it's funny, because we do the same thing now. I mean, we all have that thing that, as soon as we wake up in the morning, we're thinking, I wonder how that's going today.
Right. Yes.
For me, it's fantasy football. So I mean, if it's Sunday, I'm checking my roster. If it's
Yeah.
Thursday, I'm checking my roster.
I try to
Uh,
keep up with mine. I'm struggling.
yeah. But he was completely enamored with just the whole program. And so, anyways, he watched the whole thing, and he was getting excited, and the episode really walks through that process of all of these things that were boiling up inside of him of like, what am I doing with my life? Because he was a
Okay.
pilot, and he saw somebody achieving the height of being a pilot,
Right.
and he was like, man, if only I had done that. And
Wow.
so, being the Prince of England and being
Uh-huh.
married to the Queen, it kind of granted him a different situation than most of us probably could have back in the day, right? So the astronauts came through uh, to Buckingham Palace, and he stepped up in this meeting in the show and said, "Hey, I want a meeting, just me and the three astronauts. I have questions that I want to ask."
Ooh.
Yeah, and so it was this cool process. And so after he does that, he goes back to his study and he's just writing stuff out. Hey, I need to make sure that these three guys who got to the height of what I expect to be in this place, I need to make sure the questions I'm going to ask are spot on.
Yeah.
So he he has all of these questions and he's getting excited and the day is coming, and the astronauts come through, they meet the family, and then everyone or these four men are kind of ushered into this room, and you can just tell there's an excitement and a nervousness. And so they sit down, and he asks the first question, and he kind of goes off script, and he says, I've written down a lot of questions, but I
Mm-hmm.
think I want to start with one that really just caught my attention as I walked in, and I I've seen you and I've now talked with you, is what was it like to reach, you were in space, you were
Yeah.
on the moon. What was it like? It must have been spectacular. And they're
Uh-huh.
like, yeah, yeah, it was pretty great. And he was, he had been building this up for weeks, and in his head there was this grandiose
Right.
of the process and the experience. And their answer was just, yeah, it was cool. And so he kind of got taken back, and so he asked another question. He was like, so what was it like being up there? I mean, were you just blown away? I mean, you were closest to God that anyone has ever been.
Right.
What was it like? And they said, you know what, we were kind of bogged down with checklists. It was kind of just a procedure almost, right? It was
Right.
just, you got to check off 1, 2, 3, all the way to 37. And that's kind of where our mind was. And he said, so you didn't get blown away by just looking out and seeing Earth and its massiveness and knowing that you're such a small portion of that? They're like, well, in the 2 seconds that we were able to look at it, yeah, I mean, it was sure.
Wow.
And then to top it all off, he had kind of viewed these three men as giants,
Mm-hmm.
as major idols almost.
Yeah.
And they're 20 years younger than him.
Interesting.
And they came back from being isolated for so long. As soon as they came back into contact with anyone else, they got sick. So he's expecting them to be, the tip top shape and all of these things. And it was just a major letdown. And you could
Wow.
see just the emotional release of like, this is not what I expected.
Hmm.
I've been so caught up with this that my mind has been seeking the answers to these questions.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finally got to sit down in this room, they just lacked all enthusiasm and all life.
Yeah.
And then what was crazy, bro, is after they were like, hey, do you have, any more questions for us? He was like, no. And they said, can we ask you some questions?
Wow.
And he was like, yeah, sure.
Oh
And
my
then they proceeded to
goodness.
ask all of these crazy questions like, so is it true that if you stretched out all of the hallways of Buckingham Palace, that it would go for 4.5 miles? He was like, yeah, I guess, I don't know.
What?
he was like, what's it like to be married to the queen? You know, to have such prestige, and, you know, anywhere you go, people know you as the Prince of England. And he was like,
What?
yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess. And so it was just this
Oh my
concept of
goodness.
like, yeah. And so I watched it and I'm sitting there like,
Hmm.
wow,
Yep.
to process so long on questions that develop in your head over years,
Hmm.
to then sit down with the people who could potentially grant you the answers, to realize these are not the answers I wanted.
Yeah. Wow.
And then this is the craziest part of it all.
Hmm.
So, this whole transition for him, and I think it relates so well to my experience, which is why I connected so much with it, is after he walked away from that environment, Prince Philip, he explained, you know, through the ending of the show, just that it was so important for him to sit with those questions, because it continually led him to more questions that
Uh,
pushed him to grow even beyond what the lacking answers helped him establish, right? Because his questions of how was it like to be closest to God physically, and, you know, what, regardless of your beliefs, that concept for him was so tangible.
yeah.
And when he walked away from the experience with them, when they said, eh, he realized that the time that he spent even just contemplating that
Hmm.
allowed him to delve into those questions of, well, then if it doesn't help you to get any closer to God physically, then how do you get close?
Yeah.
And so it
Wow.
was just this big, like, wow, sometimes the answers that you fight so hard to get have nothing to do with what actually changes your life or what actually has implications for long-term purpose and growth. And it was so crazy to watch, even if it's a show, to watch, you know, three pinnacles of their field, and
Yeah.
somebody who's held in such high prestige in a position, to recognize that the questions that they both had were met with such low expectations, to then they have to go sit with the frustrating and lacking answers.
Man.
And it just made me think, like, how often do so many of us do that, where, you know, we build up things in our head so much of, if I only had this answer,
Mm.
or if I only reached this pinnacle,
Yes, yes,
then
yes, yes.
everything would be figured out.
Uh-huh.
And over the past almost 2 years, I've recognized, after asking so many people, like my old boss, or, you know, Curtis, or, you know, people in my life that have made serious impact, who have seemingly gotten to a place where they've gotten to the pinnacle,
Hmm.
their answers are only as good for themselves, and only allow me to ask the same questions to myself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I love that. That's huge because it's just these guys who are, you know, just all experts in their field, but so fascinated by what someone else is doing in their, you know, their own field. But I love that thing of just it being a letdown. Like, yeah, sure, it was great. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you ask, I don't know what it's like to, for someone to be a billionaire, but if you ask
right.
them, you know what I mean? Like that experience is going to be contingent upon them, and maybe what they explain to you is a little bit of a letdown because that's not what you were hoping for. The response
Yeah.
that you wanted is like, I figured it out. It's amazing. You want this. Trust me. Do anything
Yeah.
you can to get there.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily true. And I love what you're saying is we're left with more questions. And these questions, you know, I think one thing that you pointed out in a previous conversation, you know, that other people point out is even if you don't get the answer that you want, that's still not a bad thing because now you're that much closer to what you are actually seeking. And
Yeah.
that's why I love that biblical principle of, ask, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open unto you. And so many people,
Yeah.
I think, begin to wonder, like, it's not working, or, you know what I mean? Like, nothing's
Yeah.
happening. Well, are you doing anything? And in the pursuit of doing something, maybe you won't find like what
Mm.
you're seeking, but you're that much closer to
Yeah.
asking. Boom. I think what you're saying, what you're getting at is those right questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so easy for people who, you know, to see this concept as really a a theory, or in theoretically it sounds all rainbows and butterflies, because yeah, I mean, obviously if you ask the right questions, the answers to those questions produce the right answers, right? I
Right.
mean, if you're trying to figure out, you know, anything in life, whether it be, I don't know what color. I don't know. I can't even think of the right
Right.
question to prompt this conversation. But I mean, the concept simply is easy to
Mm-hmm.
grasp, because having the right questions leads to the right answers.
Mm,
But what you're talking about is it leads, and that one word process takes years, because it's not always a question leads to an answer. A lot of times it's a question leads to a question leads to a question.
yeah.
And it's funny because I watched a real interview of Neil Armstrong,
Mm-hmm.
and it was an hour and a half long of them asking a bunch of questions, and you know, not being met with the answers the reporters wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of summed it up when a reporter asked kind of frustratingly, like, so did you figure out anything out up there? And that's paraphrased, but I mean, his answer was, well, no, to be frank, the answers that we got don't even come close. Like, it's a grain of sand compared to the beach of questions that we have now.
Yeah.
And that is what continually leads on, because that leading process of a question leads to a question eventually will get you somewhere. And where
Yeah.
that somewhere is, you may not know, because if you don't even know what questions to ask, you don't even know where you're going. And so, and again, it's so frustrating to me, because I sat with these questions of what do I want to do for so long. And I hated that there was never a finite answer.
Yeah. So frustrating.
It's so frustrating because, in theory, again, it's easy to say, yeah, the right question leads to the right answer. But
Mm-hmm.
to sit with the question not having an answer, or having the wrong, or, like having a lacking answer, it's this major letdown. So when I
Yeah.
quit my job, I shadowed people and I asked questions. So what do you get fulfillment wise from this? What is the lifestyle you lead because of this?
Yeah.
What is your day to day? And none of the questions met any of the check boxes I had.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I ended up doing, and what really was a pivot, and I guess, talking about it now that now we've gotten through part of the story, now I'm thinking, yeah, a major pivot for me was a conversation that I had with a good friend, Tad Werku.
Mm-hmm.
And he just brought up, because I was frustrated, I was like, I don't have any answers. I've shadowed people for months. I want to
Yeah.
find a career and a path that I'm passionate about. And I haven't gotten a single answer from anyone that's helpful. And I haven't gotten a single answer from God.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just this frustrating moment. I was on the verge of tears, like, and so I went to breakfast with Tad, and he pretty much pointed out, you're not asking any of the right questions.
Oh man.
And I was like, what? And he didn't say it in such a concise way, but he said, you're focusing so much on this one aspect of your life,
Mm-hmm.
you're not having any perspective on what may be, that God is asking of you. And he
Mm-hmm.
said, and it's the point that you made about that steel worker who had the
Mm-hmm.
same job every day. Tad asked me, what can you do, and what maybe is the purpose of your marriage right now? I was like, wait, no, I'm not asking that question. I'm saying, what can I do in my life for purpose and for,
Right.
my career path? And he said, no, 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 no. I'm asking you, what other areas in your life do you need to figure out, and ask questions authentically to yourself to be able to figure out, maybe you're not doing what you need to be doing to get to the next level.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So, I mean, I think such a bigger deal, and it's what we've talked about before, is just the idea that we are such complex beings, and
Yeah.
the fact that we're made in the image of God. If God were so simple outside of just being love, we would have figured it out, and everyone on the earth would have the same opinion. But
Man.
just simply the complexity that we go through, and this is what, before we jumped on here, we kind of touched on, is just that complexity is frustrating at times, because you get so caught up with the little things in your life that you feel like, hey, I'm sitting at this 9 to 5 job that I do not like.
Hmm.
But maybe your frustrations, and the fact that you're not content in one area of your life, maybe it's a part of another area of your life. And it's such a key thing to really narrow everything down to a complex, simple level, if that makes sense. And so, yeah,
Yeah. Dude, so many things. Like one thing I'm learning is I need a pen and a notepad now, because I just want to write down so many things that I'm learning right now and so many things that are coming to mind, dude. Man, you know, yeah, just touching on the idea that, we are complex as human beings, but why is it that we don't want to sit in that tension of asking the questions? I I, I think it's maybe fear that we're not going to get the answer that we want, but in a very roundabout way, we are getting closer to what we actually want. So as you're describing this connection with Tad, as you guys and I are sharing, um, what if what you're truly looking, what if it could be your marriage? What if it could be it could be so many different things.
yeah,
And I was even thinking about that as you were sharing, I'm trying to podcast, I'm getting into blogging, I'm getting into so many things. And it's just so interesting that in the process of everything I'm doing, Alicia and I have been working together, to try to strategize and come up with these things. And it's taken us to just a different space of creativity,
yeah,
especially when it comes to impacting, a larger community. And this is somewhere where, I would have never thought of thinking about if I
mm,
had not asked the question, okay, God, where are you going? What should I be doing? You know,
yeah,
and exploring these different, avenues of, expressing, whatever it is that we're wanting to communicate. Um,
yeah,
but the other idea that came up as you were sharing is, this self-awareness, I think, which is where I
yes,
want to get to ultimately is, you know, Moses's experience with God in the burning bush. It's so interesting that God introduces himself as I am who I am. And
yeah,
I'm a Greek and Hebrew nerd. And so the idea is in ancient Near Eastern culture, when Moses asks God, when I go back to the Israelites and I tell them who you are, who do I say sent me? Because the idea back then is I have to put a title or a name on this being in order to define and in order to explain who is telling me what I'm supposed to be doing. But it's so funny that
yep,
God chooses to express himself in the most self-aware way. I am who
yeah,
I am. And in the Hebrew, the connotation is past, present, and future, meaning what God is saying is how he's introducing himself is as I am who I am. I have been who I have been, and
yeah,
I will be whatever it is I will be.
mm,
Don't worry about defining me or trying to explain me or get that one thing out of me, because I have been who I've needed to be. I am who
yeah,
I need to be, and I will be whatever it is you need me to be. Don't worry right now in this moment as, defining me as one specific thing.
yeah,
But Aaron, you just said we were created in the image of God. That's the
mm,
belief system, you know, we believe in. But if we are created in the image of God and God is that self-aware, What does that mean for us as his creation? That self-awareness being a key factor into who we're becoming, what we're doing. But man, just so many things going through my
Yep.
mind. But I think in my opinion, you're winning if you're asking the questions. You're winning if you're questioning.
Yep.
Yeah. And so what I kind of want to go in that direction of self-awareness.
For sure.
Where should we be asking the questions? What questions should we be asking that will ultimately lead us to what we're truly seeking?
Yeah. And I think you've touched on exactly the idea behind the answer, right? I never want to say that here's the answer, because we're
Yeah, we
talking
don't
about,
want to do that.
we don't want that. But what you exactly talked about, my favorite story in the Bible is of Jacob. And it's for a lot of different reasons, but I was reading up on it this morning, preparing for this, and just that idea that you talked about of God being who he has always needed to be and will always continue to be. And what I think is so interesting about the story of Jacob is he walks through the progression of finding out who he is, right?
Yeah.
The whole birth order issue, and his identity of his mom and his dad, and then the transition of, no, you are no longer Jacob, you are Israel. And that concept of, prior to that story in the Bible, it was always, the God of Abraham or the God of Isaac. And it references, once he's gone through the process of identifying himself with God as somebody who has wrestled with God, right? After that pivot point for him, it changed. And in text, it talks about God of Jacob. And that designation, I think, is exactly what is so important. And what you talk about, God lends his name and his identity to whatever is best serving a relationship.
Okay.
And for that concept that Jacob needed to understand, that it is no longer my father's or my grandfather's God, but it is my God.
Wow.
Helped him to identify who he really was. And it wasn't, his feud with Esau, and it wasn't, the fact that he fled, or any of these concepts of, we don't need to get into too much of that, but just that concept of defining himself in the ways that not only God called him to be defined, but also what he defined himself to do. Up until that point, I couldn't even imagine somebody laying hands or, going fisticuffs with God. And Jacob was like, no, I'm
gonna do it. I'm gonna be the guy.
Yep, that's me. And it was because he was so adamant that he needed questions answered without actually ever asking questions. It was simply, I want to be blessed in the way that you want to bless me. No idea what that means, but you need to bless me, and I'm not leaving this place until that happens.
Yeah.
And it defined him. And so the way that I want to answer that question for anyone who's struggling with it is to be able to ask the right questions. You need to have that self-awareness, and you need to identify not only with who you are and where your belief system lies, and getting outside just the context of a relationship with God, because I think God is, like you said, will lend himself forever in the way that people need him. And if that is, bigger than a box of God,
right,
then so be it. And God will use people wherever they are with whatever they have. And so what I think is super important for people to understand, and I'm still struggling with this every day, which is why I love this story, because of Jacob, because it talks about wrestling. Wrestling with the concepts and the issues that you have on your heart and that you want answered. And so I think asking the right questions truly comes down to being authentic with understanding yourself.
Yes.
And so where I think I want to go is, and we've talked about this, is God, we were made in God's image, and God gave us emotions. And those emotions, across the board, usually indicate one way or another. the example of the guy with the at the tin or the steel working,
Yeah.
he wasn't needing anything else out of his job.
Right.
But somebody who is sitting at a 9 to 5 who can't stand it. I don't
Mm-hmm.
just mean like, it's a job. I'm putting up, shutting up.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about somebody who truly hates their 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's an authentic emotion that you have to deal with.
Mm.
And so then asking the question based on that self-awareness, you need
Mm-hmm.
to start to develop an understanding of why you're feeling that way.
Yeah.
And the question is different for every person. It may be, am I bringing stuff to work that I shouldn't be? Or is there an environment at work that I don't enjoy? Or is
Yeah.
it actually the tasks that I'm completing?
Mm-hmm.
Because all of those have very different answers and also lead you on a much different path of asking more questions, right? If you hate the tasks that you're doing, if you hate the actual work,
Mm-hmm.
you probably shouldn't be doing that work.
Yeah.
But if it's an environment, if it's a toxic environment, because it's real, everyone has their own baggage, and so if
Mm-hmm.
you get enough baggage in a workplace, it's going to be pretty toxic.
Yeah.
And so if you like the work, go find a new place, and so I think it's important to understand your emotions and being self-aware with that, but then truly narrowing it down. And what I think, and I think this is where it really leads to, a lot of times you can't get there on
Hmm.
your own. A lot of
Yeah.
times you're not self-aware, and especially
Wow.
for people who are busy, right? If you're going from a 9 to 5 to then a 5 to 11, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that may be, and that
Mm-hmm.
5 to 11 or 12, whenever your bedtime is, right? Mine's like 9:30 with me and my wife waking up early,
Amen.
but right, but wherever that block of time is being spent, if you're coaching, if you're developing relationships, if you're dating, if you're playing in a rec league or in a book club, or whatever it is that you're spending the rest of your time, if you're filled up, you don't have the time to be self-aware.
Hmm.
And that's why I think it's so crazy, the time that we're in and the opportunity that 2020 has provided us,
Mm-hmm.
is because a lot of those things are minimized, right?
Yeah.
You have so many people that are sitting in spaces they didn't have the time to sit in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that struggle is coming out a lot more. And so I think it's so important for us to understand, especially anyone who wants to help people, because right, that's what I want to do. That's both of our careers right now lend themselves to helping people walk through these periods of time. With
Yeah.
your students, it's sitting down and saying, hey, it's a big world out there. I
Mm-hmm.
just want to help you navigate it.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to sit in that tension that we use to explain the contrast of where I want to go and where I am,
Yeah.
you get to walk through some you get to walk through with somebody. And I think that that's a big key, because if we don't have people in our lives, for somebody who doesn't have a chaplain on their campus, or don't have people regularly checking in to say, hey, Zach, why are you down more
Yeah.
so than usual? Or
Yeah.
you don't have the same spirit that I feel like you would recognize in yourself. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it is such a big deal of self-awareness, because really at the end of the day, you need to be the one to answer your questions, especially pulling from
There you
from our
go.
example of Prince Philip, right? I mean, you can't expect anyone else to give you the answers that you want.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But you also need people to push you,
Mm.
and you need people to understand that if you're not asking some of the right questions, you need to, right? And that's what you have done for me. And I have so many friends. Good friend Cody Holthouse actually sent me this episode of of with talking about Prince Philip and the
Hmm.
astronauts. He was like, "This is exactly where you've been for the last almost 2 years."
Yeah.
And he said, "I'm proud of you," but he's also been somebody who talked me through this process and saying, "What is going on, Aaron? Because you need to figure this out. I don't have any answers for you. I
Hmm.
genuinely don't even have any questions for you,
Hmm.
but I want to walk through this with you." And so I think that's really where it comes down to figuring out this big issue that so many people struggle with, right? And it's so crazy because it's not a one size fits all. The
Yeah.
same answer that Philip needed to hear, the same questions that he needed to ask, weren't the same for, you know, my buddy Kurt, with his career and the fact that he's pretty much never needed to ask questions about that.
Hmm.
There's been some other things in his life that he's had to ask questions about, but it's that process. My buddy Tad, the questions that we all ask,
Hmm.
Cody, there's so many people that we get into that you don't understand where they're coming from. And so
Hmm.
the questions that you may ask them or that they may ask you aren't necessarily going to relate. But what's so cool is once you start getting into this cycle of seeking and learning and really trying to be self-aware, it sparks stuff.
Yeah. That's what man, it's two things that stood out to me that I just want to reflect on. Is the first one is you said using Jacob as an illustration, perfect. Because even in Jacob's prayer, it doesn't even like seem like he knows what he's praying for. Like his
Yeah.
brother's about to kill him. He
Right.
could be praying for God to save him, but instead he wrestles with the angel
Yeah.
all evening, or he wrestles with God, right? All evening, because he's ultimately just wanting that blessing. He's tired of running. He's
Yeah.
tired of chasing whatever that thing might be. And he's come to that wit's end of self-awareness
Yep.
of he's holding on to whatever it is, that he's looking for, that blessing. And I think we need to sit in that tension, like you're saying, Aaron, sit in that tension of that self-awareness of being authentic with ourselves. Do we really like what we are doing? I think for me, Aaron, what it was is, do I like who I'm becoming?
Yep.
When I see people in my space and I see who they are, do I ultimately want to be like that?
Yeah.
And identifying those road markers, those red flags, like ultimately at the end of my days, um, not only do I want, what do I want people to say of me, but also how about those people that are most important to me? What do I want
Uh-huh.
them to say of me? Um, you know, that sort of thing. And then it leads into what you just said, putting those people into your lives that can maybe not give you the answers, maybe not even, but I think you put it like this: putting people into your life that are better at interviewing than advising, that are better than
Yes.
walking that journey with you, interviewing you. Cody, I love Cody, man. That guy's so awesome.
Ah, he is.
And Tad too. Tad was an incredible guy when I knew him at PUC. But
Yep.
walking in that space, having guys like that walk into that space with you and be like, "All right, man, we got to figure something out," or
Yep.
I'm willing to do this journey with you. Huge, man, huge. And that's how this
Ah,
conversation got started, because you did that with me.
yep.
And it literally, dude, it set me on this, this path of, I guess you call it self-discovery, but I think
Yep.
it's genuinely just self-awareness and authenticity.
Yeah.
um just coming to the point where you're truly being honest with yourself. And I think it's because most of our lives we're advised on what to do, that we never learn to sit in that space of discovering what we want to do or who we want to
Yeah.
be. So
Yeah.
so we're always looking then, okay, fix this problem for me, or answer this question for me, or figure
Yep.
this thing out for me. And we pay, right? I don't know about the business world too much, but I'm reading a book by Brad Lomenick called H3
Yep.
Leadership, where
Yes.
he's a consultant, and that's a big thing, is paying people to consult, to help advise you. And what he said is ultimately what you got to, which is the responsibility at the end of the day ultimately falls on you to make sure you're identifying that thing that's going to push you forward, or whatever it is, that thing that's going to get you going. Because that's the ultimate question that he asks companies who want to be successful. They want to know what they must do to be successful. And he asks them, but what do you want to be doing? Ultimately, what
Yeah,
is it that you are seeking?
yeah,
Yeah, man, that's so much, man. So much to think about.
it is. And what's funny is, so I actually just listened to a podcast with uh, with him and Ben Lundquist, who's
That's right. Yep.
another big player within my journey, and something that he did with me, which is exactly what you're talking about, is he walked me through my life journey, and we spent a bunch of time figuring out that exact question.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, I was frustrated, and I don't even know if I've shared this with him, but I was frustrated with the fact that at the end of that process, because we spent 2.5 solid days, like I'm talking about 10 hours, and 5 hours
Wow.
in a room, just the two of us, delving into all of this.
Hmm.
And at the end of it, I was no closer in my mind
Hmm.
to where I wanted to be.
Right.
And what I have learned since then is that jump started me to simply asking a lot more of the questions of where do I want to be? Because I
Hmm.
wanted him to tell me, hey, you need to go be a pastor, or you need
Yeah.
to go be a financial analyst, or, and I thought going into that, that's kind of what it was going to be. And at the end of it, he pretty much just said, here's a checklist of things that you've explained as part of what makes up your heart and how it has a rhythm.
Hmm.
That is a big part of what you need to
Ooh.
go search for.
Yeah,
It
it's a sweet spot.
has nothing to do with the actual the steps to get there, or even what it looks like to do that in
Hmm.
the formal sense that we all understand in a vocation or a title.
Hmm.
But he really challenged me, and essentially said it has very little to do with that if you're wanting to live the best life. And to kind of encapsulate everything that I've shared is, Ed Milet, I sent you this the other day, talked about the concept of, when I get to heaven,
Yes.
the question that I wanted answered growing up was, is God going to say, you did well, you served me well, good and faithful servant?
Hmm.
But what he is now transitioned to is whether, and this isn't how it's going to be, but this is how he thinks, and this is something that I've kind of approached my life with, is God creates this twin
Hmm.
of the absolute potential that he created in you, and living out the best life possible,
Right.
impacting and loving on many people as possible. And that twin's going to be at heaven. And the question that he asks himself is, what am I doing every day to become that person? And maybe twin's not the right word, but I mean, it's the concept of, if there is this grandiose, or there's this master plan that God has created in me, or whatever your theological background is,
Right.
that concept of who I am supposed to become, what am I doing every day to become that person?
Mm.
And it is the question that I come back to every day, which is,
Mm.
if I'm not striving to be the best me,
Hmm.
what am I doing?
What am I doing? Yeah.
And then every other question gets filtered through that. And it makes it
Right.
so much easier, because you can align yourself a lot better. And that's what's
Hmm.
so cool, is because when we go through these periods of of life that change, that question remains.
Yeah.
So when I was looking at my job and saying, do I quit or do I not? That question's no longer relevant,
Hmm.
right? So you can't ever get comfortable with a list of questions that you ask yourself, unless they're questions for the long term of, stuff like, am I becoming who I want to become? And you
Yeah.
said it perfectly. And that's exactly what I think we need to, especially as a faith community, need to do
Mm-hmm.
better,
Mm-hmm.
is asking a whole lot more questions. We used to
Mm-hmm.
ask questions all the time
I
as
know,
kids.
man.
And I think that curiosity inwards is almost as important as, you know, ah, what's that star's name? Or, what's this food? So yeah, I mean, I think it's such a crucial step as anyone wanting to learn and to grow themselves is to consistently ask themselves good questions and surround themselves with people who not only ask questions of you, but also are asking the same questions of themselves, because
Mm.
you know greatness influences and inspires greatness.
Yeah. I love what you said. You brought out this idea. I went to Catalyst a few years ago with
Yeah,
Ben Lundquist and a whole crew.
yeah,
Um, and the theme was wonder or awake. I think like awaken the wonder or wonder or something like that.
yeah.
And just capturing that idea, like, do we lose our wonder?
Mm,
I think that's why Jesus says, pointing at the little children, he says, of these is the kingdom of heaven, because they have that curiosity, that wonder. And it's such a it's knowledge can sometimes be such a destroyer. Even
mm,
in the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of the knowing of the good and evil, all of a sudden they knew everything, but then like at the same time they felt so much just like unnecessary things that
yeah,
weren't necessarily positive for them, versus keeping that curiosity, that wonder of the way things could be. It's like now knowing everything didn't necessarily propel them forward,
yeah,
but now they were struggling with that identity, and they had to go back to asking those questions. What am I doing? Where am I going? What's happening?
yeah,
So I love that, man.
yeah.
Dude,
It's so
thank you so
powerful.
much, Aaron. You dropped knowledge today. You got me thinking. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate your friendship. For those who don't know, Aaron's been journeying with me for a little while now. And I appreciate just the time that you've invested in me. And like I said, I prayed before we started. I
Yeah,
pray that I could be a fraction of the blessing to you and
not even, man.
everything you're doing, man. So we appreciate you.
I appreciate you, and that's again, that's just what is so incredible about our journey is, we started as just little kids, fake fighting our way through life, and now we're struggling and we're wrestling with God and what He has in store, and you definitely have impacted my life more than you know. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate what you're doing with this podcast. It's a big deal, man. So I encourage you, keep it going, and you're reaching people in a powerful way. So thank you from all of us listeners out there.
Not even, man. We appreciate you.